The war that killed more than 1 million people may have begun long before the first shot was fired, long before starving children appeared on television screens, long before the name Biafra became known around the world. The story may have started in a room filled with maps. Not in Nigeria. In Britain, in the late 19th century, European powers gathered to divide Africa among themselves. Borders were drawn with rulers in ink. Ancient kingdoms were split apart. Rival peoples were forced into artificial states. Communities that had evolved separately for centuries suddenly found themselves trapped within borders they never chose. One of those artificial creations was Nigeria. In 1914, Britain merged the northern and southern protectorates into a single colony. The decision was made for administrative convenience and economic efficiency, not because the people involved shared a common national identity. The result was a country containing hundreds of ethnic groups, multiple religions, and vastly different political traditions. For decades, British colonial policies often strengthened regional identities rather than creating a unified nation. By the time independence arrived in 1960, Nigeria was politically divided into powerful regional blocs that viewed one another with growing suspicion. The British flag came down, Nigeria was free. But independence did not erase the tensions that colonial rule had left behind. It merely exposed them. Political competition intensified. Regional leaders fought for power. Elections became increasingly controversial. Trust between regions began to crumble. Then came a discovery that would change everything. Oil. Massive petroleum reserves were found in the Niger Delta, much of it located in the eastern region. At first, few ordinary Nigerians realized how valuable these resources would become. Foreign governments and multinational corporations understood immediately the future was oil, and whoever controlled the oil would possess extraordinary wealth. By the mid-1960s, Nigeria was becoming increasingly unstable. Then, on the 15th of January, 1966, everything exploded. A group of young military officers launched a coup. Prime Minister Sir Abubakar Tafawa Balewa was killed. Northern Premier Sir Amadou Bello was killed. Western Premier Samuel Akintola was killed. Many of the leading victims were northern politicians. Although the coup plotters came from different backgrounds, many northerners viewed it as an Igbo conspiracy. The perception proved disastrous. Major General Johnson Agui Ironsi assumed power as Nigeria's military leader, but his government faced enormous resistance. Then came another turning point. In July 1966, northern officers staged a counter-coup. Ironsi was captured and killed. Lieutenant Colonel Yakubu Gowon emerged as Nigeria's new leader. What followed remains one of the darkest chapters in Nigerian history. Across northern Nigeria, large-scale massacres of Igbo civilians erupted. Men, women, and children were attacked. Homes were destroyed. Businesses were looted. Thousands died. Terrified survivors fled eastward. Train stations became overcrowded. Roads filled with refugees carrying whatever possessions they could save. Many arrived in the eastern region with horrifying stories. Entire families wiped out, friends murdered before their eyes, communities erased overnight. For many Easterners, the question was no longer political. It was existential. Could they remain part of a country where they no longer felt safe? The military governor of the eastern region, Lieutenant Colonel Chukwuemeka Odumegwu Ojukwu, demanded stronger guarantees for the safety of his people. Nigeria was rapidly moving toward collapse. Then came a meeting that many historians consider the last real chance to prevent the war, a meeting that took place far away from Nigeria, in the town of Aburi, Ghana, January 1967. The leaders of Nigeria flew to Ghana at the invitation of Ghanaian leader, Lieutenant General Joseph Arthur Ankra. The atmosphere was tense. Trust had almost completely disappeared. Yet there was still hope. Around a conference table sat Yakubu Gowon, Ojukwu, and senior military leaders from across Nigeria. For days, they negotiated, argued, compromised, searched desperately for a way to keep the country together. What emerged became known as the Aburi Accord, and for a brief moment it seemed like peace had been saved. The agreement proposed a loose federation in which the regions would enjoy substantial autonomy. Military powers would be decentralized. Regional governments would exercise greater control over their own affairs. The central government would become significantly weaker. For Ojukwu, this was essential. After the massacres, he no longer trusted a powerful central authority dominated by other regions. The accord offered a structure that could allow the East to remain within Nigeria while protecting itself. The delegates reportedly left Ghana believing they had reached a historic breakthrough. But when they returned home, everything began to unravel. Almost immediately, disagreements emerged over what had actually been agreed upon. Different interpretations circulated. Federal officials argued that some provisions were impractical. Others feared the agreement would effectively break Nigeria into separate states. Military leaders worried that decentralization would destroy national unity. Meanwhile, Ojukwu insisted that the accord must be implemented exactly as negotiated. The trust that had briefly appeared in Ghana vanished. Each side accused the other of bad faith. Each side claimed the other was changing the terms. The Aburi Accord, once viewed as a pathway to peace, became another source of conflict. Many Biafran supporters would later argue that the failure to implement Aburi made war inevitable. To them, Aburi represented Nigeria's last missed opportunity, the last exit before disaster. As tensions increased, Gowon's government announced the creation of 12 new states in May 1967. The decision dramatically altered Nigeria's political map. Crucially, it divided the eastern region and separated some oil-producing areas from Ojukwu's control. To Ojukwu, this was unacceptable. To the federal government, it was necessary for national stability. The final break was approaching. On the 30th of May, 1967, Ojukwu declared the independence of the Republic of Biafra. The new nation was born. Crowds celebrated. Flags were raised. Many believed they were securing their survival. But the declaration also triggered a crisis that would soon become a full-scale war. The Nigerian federal government rejected secession. Negotiations collapsed. Military operations began. The Nigerian Civil War had started. This is where Britain's role becomes especially controversial. Britain quickly aligned itself with the federal government. Officially, British leaders argued they were defending Nigeria's territorial integrity and preventing the fragmentation of Africa into countless competing states. That explanation had genuine support among many African governments. But critics suspected another motive. Oil. The eastern region contained some of the most valuable petroleum reserves in the country. British economic interests were deeply connected to Nigerian oil production. A successful Biafran state could potentially reshape those arrangements. As the war intensified, Britain supplied arms and diplomatic support to the federal government. International recognition overwhelmingly favored Nigeria. Biafra found itself increasingly isolated. Whether Britain's actions were driven primarily by geopolitical concerns, economic interests, or a combination of both, remains one of the most fiercely debated questions in the history of the conflict. Meanwhile, the humanitarian situation deteriorated. Federal blockades restricted supplies entering Biafra. Food shortages became catastrophic. Disease spread. Children suffered severe malnutrition. Images of starving Biafran civilians shocked the world. For many international observers, these images became the defining symbol of the war. Aid organizations launched emergency relief efforts. Pilots flew dangerous nighttime missions carrying food and medicine. Church groups mobilized across continents. Yet the suffering continued. Millions faced hunger. Countless families were torn apart. The war had become one of the worst humanitarian disasters of the 20th century. And all the while, one haunting question lingered. What if Aburi had succeeded? What if the promises made in Ghana had been honored? What if trust had survived just a little longer? No one can know for certain, but many historians agree that the Aburi Accord represented the last serious opportunity to prevent the bloodshed that followed. By late 1969, Biafra was exhausted. Its territory had shrunk dramatically. Supplies were nearly gone. Military resistance became increasingly difficult. Then, in January 1970, the end finally arrived. Biafran forces surrendered. The war was over. Nigeria remained one nation, but the scars remained. Families mourned, loved ones, communities rebuilt from ruins. Survivors carried memories that would never fade, and historians continued debating the same question. Who bears responsibility? Was the war the result of colonial boundaries drawn decades earlier? Was it caused by ethnic tensions and political rivalries? Did the collapse of the Aburi Accord make conflict unavoidable? Did foreign powers, including Britain, help shape the outcome? The answer is not a single event. It is a chain of decisions stretching across decades. From the British amalgamation of 1914 to the political divisions of the colonial era, to the coups of 1966, to the massacres that shattered trust, to the promises made at Aburi, to the failure of those promises, to the declaration of Biafra, and finally, to the war itself. Perhaps that is the most tragic lesson of all. The Biafra War was not born in a single day. It was the result of countless decisions, misunderstandings, ambitions, fears, and missed opportunities. And among those missed opportunities, one stands above the rest. A conference room in Aburi, Ghana. A table surrounded by leaders searching for peace. A signed understanding that briefly offered hope. And a moment when history could have taken a different path. A moment that disappeared. And once it did, Africa's deadliest post-colonial conflict became almost impossible to stop. Like, subscribe, and join us as we uncover the hidden realities history never told you.